Welcome, travelers of time and myth, to Forgotten Scrolls. Have you ever wondered what life was like in one of history's most fascinating civilizations? This journey will take us to the banks of the majestic Nile River, where ancient Egypt was born. If you seek to uncover its secrets, its gods, and its mysteries, you are in the right place. This story is for those curious to understand an ancient world that profoundly influenced our culture, science, and spirituality. Here, you will discover the grandeur of the pharaohs, the architectural wonders, and the wisdom that still astonishes archaeologists and scientists today. I will accompany you on a narrative that will help you imagine that past in a relaxing and profound way. In each chapter, we will explore unique aspects of ancient Egypt, from its daily life to its religious beliefs, passing through its achievements in medicine and technology. We will not just recount facts. I will invite you to feel the atmosphere of a culture that dominated history for millennia. Prepare for a journey full of images and sensations that will transport you without moving. By the end of this journey, you will better understand how this civilization built an eternal legacy that remains present in modern art, science, and spirituality. If you are passionate about stories that combine mystery, power, and knowledge, this tale will help you relax and learn at the same time. Remember that here, history comes alive. I invite you to follow our channel and become a member for early access to videos. Being part of this community means traveling with us through time and discovering the secrets of the past together. Each chapter is designed for you to relax and enjoy knowledge with the depth you deserve. Welcome to this adventure in Forgotten Scrolls. Chapter 1. Born of the Nile. Ancient Egypt was born on the banks of the Nile River, a source of life and prosperity in the midst of the desert. Each year, its floods brought fertile waters that allowed for agriculture, the foundation of their economy and survival. Without the Nile, Egyptian civilization could not have developed with such strength and stability. The first communities organized around these rich lands, learning to sow and harness natural resources. Farmers were the ones who sustained society, working the lands that were then distributed to feed the entire population. The rhythm of the Nile marked the agricultural and religious calendar. Over time, small towns united into kingdoms and dynasties that sought to control the wealth of the river and its surroundings. This is how the formation of the Egyptian state began, with a political structure that was consolidated by territorial control and social organization. The unification of Upper and Lower Egypt marked a crucial milestone. The Nile was not only an economic resource, but also a sacred symbol that connected earthly life with the afterlife. Egyptians venerated its waters as the divine manifestation that guaranteed order and continuity. The relationship between humans and nature was imbued with spirituality and deep respect. The development of hieroglyphic writing facilitated the recording of history and beliefs. In addition to allowing the administration of a growing empire, the first inscriptions and monuments began to leave testimonies of nascent grandeur. This writing became the key to understanding their culture. Cities grew around temples and palaces that reflected the power of the rulers. The Nile was an essential transportation route that united distant towns, facilitating trade and cultural exchange. Navigation became a fundamental skill for the Egyptians. Communities built dikes and canals to control floods and maximize the fertility of the land. This hydraulic engineering was crucial for the empire's stability and expansion. Farmers were experts in predicting and taking advantage of the river's cycles for their benefit. Ancient Egyptians developed a belief system that explained the origin of the world and life through myths linked to the Nile and its protective gods. These narratives were transmitted orally and then recorded in sacred texts. Religion permeated all aspects of life. Pharaohs emerged as divine figures, intermediaries between men and gods, responsible for maintaining cosmic order, myat, and justice. Their power was based on this spiritual connection and on their ability to control the Nile and its resources. They were symbols of order and prosperity. Egyptian society was organized into clear classes from priests and nobles to artisans and peasants, each with a defined role that contributed to the common well-being. This hierarchical structure allowed for the efficient administration of the territory and the protection of their culture. The development of intensive agriculture and craftsmanship led to dynamic trade with other regions, establishing Egypt as an important center in the ancient world. The products of the Nile were coveted and allowed for the accumulation of wealth and prestige. Thus, born of the Nile, the Egyptians built a unique civilization, marked by its adaptation to the environment and its deep connection with its sacred river. This initial chapter lays the foundation for understanding the complexity and richness of ancient Egypt, a culture that endured for thousands of years. Chapter 2: Pharaohs, Gods, and Eternal Power. The pharaohs were the central figures of ancient Egypt, considered divine kings, who ruled with absolute authority. Their power was not only political, but also spiritual, as they were seen as intermediaries between the gods and the people. This blend of earthly and divine power granted them a unique and incomparable status. Each pharaoh was identified with a particular deity and was expected to maintain the cosmic order known as Ma'at. Their primary mission was to preserve harmony on Earth, ensuring prosperity, justice, and balance between humans and divine forces. Failure. To fulfill these responsibilities could bring chaos and misfortune. The pharaoh exercised his authority from the capital, directing political, religious, and military affairs. His palace was a center of power, where crucial decisions were made for the entire kingdom. Additionally, he supervised monumental projects such as the construction of temples and pyramids that demonstrated his grandeur and his connection with the gods. Egyptian religion was deeply intertwined with the pharaoh's life. It was believed that after his death, the monarch transformed into a god and joined eternity alongside Osiris, the god of resurrection. This divine aspect encouraged the elaborate, complex funerary rituals to ensure his safe passage to the afterlife. Egyptian gods represented natural and spiritual forces, each with specific attributes and responsibilities. Ra, the sun god, was the supreme deity who illuminated the world and gave life to all. Isis, Osiris, and Horus were other essential gods in a mythology who directly influenced daily life and the Egyptian worldview. The worship of the gods was expressed in majestic temples where priests performed ceremonies and maintained communication between men and divinities. These constructions were symbols of divine and human power, and each pharaoh sought to honor the gods to legitimize his mandate and ensure the kingdom's stability. The pharaoh was the high priest of Egypt, and his figure was revered throughout the territory. His image appeared in statues, reliefs, and papyri, always represented with symbols that reflected his power and divine connection. This iconography reinforced the idea of a sacred and eternal government, capable of guiding its people towards prosperity. The use of symbols like the double crown, which united Upper and Lower Egypt, represented the unification and the pharaoh's dominion over the entire territory. His authority extended over every corner of the kingdom, and his mandate had to be respected by nobles, priests, and peasants alike. Obedience was part of maintaining social balance. Pharaonic dynasties succeeded each other for millennia, each leaving its mark on Egyptian history and culture. Some pharaohs, like Tutankhamun and Ramesses II, are remembered for their monumental legacies and policies. Others, though less known, also contributed to the political and religious evolution of the empire. The pharaoh's power was not exempt from internal and external challenges. Revolutions, conspiracies, and threats from neighboring peoples tested their authority. However, religion and the belief in their divinity helped sustain their dominion, strengthening national identity and social cohesion. In the collective memory of Egypt, the pharaohs are symbols of supreme power and a special relationship with the gods. Their rule represented an era of stability, splendor, and mystery that still fascinates historians and those who seek to understand the origin of civilization. The imprint of their power endures through time. This chapter reveals how the figure of the pharaoh and religion were the driving force that sustained Egypt for centuries, consolidating an empire that seemed eternal. The union between the human and the divine created a rich and complex culture, capable of influencing the ancient world and leaving an indelible legacy in universal history. Chapter 3. Pyramids, Tombs, and Secrets. The pyramids are the most iconic symbol of ancient Egypt, built as monumental tombs for pharaohs and their passage to the afterlife. These majestic structures reflect power and the belief in eternal life, where death was not the end, but a transition to another existence. The Great Pyramid of Giza is the most famous and one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The construction process of the pyramids required meticulous planning and massive labor from thousands of specialized workers. These workers were not slaves, but artisans and farmers who collaborated during flood seasons when agriculture ceased. The precision in alignment and engineering demonstrates an advanced knowledge of mathematics and astronomy. Inside the pyramids, burial chambers house the pharaoh's sarcophagus and objects intended to accompany him on his journey to the afterlife. The cult of mummification allowed the body to be preserved, necessary for the soul to return and live eternally. Pyramid texts and funerary papyri explained rituals and enchantments to protect the deceased. In addition to the pyramids, there were tombs in the Valley of the Kings, where pharaohs from later dynasties were buried with elaborate frescoes and treasures. These places were kept secret to prevent looting, although many were discovered and studied by modern archaeologists. Funerary architecture evolved to ensure spiritual security and protection. The secrets hidden in these tombs go beyond their funerary function. They represent mystical knowledge and a connection with the gods, especially with Osiris, who presided over the realm of the dead. Every detail was designed to ensure that the pharaoh could be reborn and rule eternally in the afterlife, in a realm of peace and light. The temples that accompanied the pyramids were religious centers where gods were worshipped and ceremonies were performed to maintain universal balance. These temples, like those of Karnak or Luxor, reflected Egypt's cultural and spiritual richness. Their columns and reliefs narrated myths and celebrated the grandeur of gods and pharaohs. Hieroglyphic inscriptions on walls and stelae preserve accounts of battles, genealogies, and prayers that allowed Egyptian history to reach us. Writing was a vital tool for perpetuating the memory of pharaohs and their feats, ensuring their immortality through the word. Each symbol had a sacred meaning. The mystery of pyramid construction continues to fascinate researchers who study techniques for transporting enormous stone blocks and the social organization behind these works. The use of ramps, levers, and advanced geometric knowledge shows a civilization with technical skills superior for its time. This technological legacy is admirable. The secrets of the pyramids also include astronomical alignments that connect the structures with stars and constellations important in Egyptian mythology. This reflects the deep relationship between the cosmos and religion, where the sky was a sacred map that guided life and death. Astronomy was an integral part of their culture. Tombs contained everyday objects, jewelry, statues, and food meant for the pharaoh to enjoy a comfortable afterlife. This custom reveals the belief in a parallel existence where earthly needs continued to be important. Wealth and luxury accompanied the hope of a happy eternity. Finally, the pyramids and tombs are eternal testaments to the ingenuity, faith, and ambition of ancient Egypt. Their majesty invites reflection on the passage of time and the human quest to transcend death. These monuments continue to challenge our understanding and evoke admiration worldwide. Chapter 4. Daily life in the land of the sun. Daily life in ancient Egypt revolved around the Nile River, a source of sustenance and fertility. Farmers worked the land to produce wheat, barley, and flax, essential ingredients for food and the economy. Society was hierarchically organized, but each person had a fundamental role in the kingdom's functioning. Egyptian houses were simple and made of mud brick, adapted to the warm, dry climate. In towns, families lived united, sharing daily chores and celebrations. The diet included bread, barley, vegetables, and fish, complemented by fruits and honey. Beer was a common and appreciated beverage, consumed by all social classes. Markets were vibrant spaces where products, textiles, and crafts were exchanged. Merchants and artisans contributed to economic dynamism, offering goods that arrived from other regions. Barter coexisted with coinage, and commercial activity favored prosperity and contact with neighboring cultures. Education was reserved for the elites, where scribes and priests learned reading, writing, and mathematics. Scribes played a key role in administration and the preservation of knowledge, using hieroglyphic writing to record laws, commerce, and religion. This profession enjoyed great social respect. Egyptian women had a relatively advanced status for their time. They could manage property, initiate divorces, and participate in business. Motherhood and the home were central to their lives, but there were also women who held roles as priestesses, artisans, or even scribes. The female figure was valued in society. Clothing reflected climate and social position. Men wore kilts and light tunics, while women preferred long, fitted dresses. The use of jewelry and perfumes was common, highlighting the importance of aesthetics and personal care. Beauty practices included elaborate makeup and hairstyles. Religious festivals were times of collective gathering and celebration. Gods like Ra, Osiris, and Isis were honored with rituals, processions, and offerings. These ceremonies reinforced cultural identity and a sense of belonging, in addition to seeking protection and prosperity for the community. Egyptian medicine combined empirical knowledge with spiritual beliefs. Doctors used herbs, ointments, and simple surgical techniques to treat diseases. Rituals and magic accompanied treatments, reflecting the idea that health depended on both body and soul. Craftsmanship stood out for its quality and variety, including work in ceramics, metallurgy, jewelry, and textiles. These objects not only had practical use, but also symbolic and artistic value. Artisans transmitted ancestral techniques that enriched Egyptian material culture. Leisure and entertainment included board games like sonnet, music, dance, and sports activities. These practices were part of the balance between work and rest, and were enjoyed in both court and popular life. Music played an important role in ceremonies and festivities. Domestic and urban architecture reflected the order and functionality necessary for coexistence. Streets and dwellings followed a design that facilitated community life, with spaces dedicated to commerce, religion, and local administration. Urban planning was another reflection of civilizational advancement. Finally, daily life in the land of the sun showed a complex and dynamic society, where religion, economy, and culture intertwined in harmony. This way of life allowed ancient Egypt to maintain its splendor for millennia, leaving an indelible mark on humanity's history. Chapter 5. Women of the Nile. Queens, goddesses, and sages. Women in ancient Egypt played very diverse roles and, in many cases, enjoyed rights and freedoms uncommon for the era. Some reached the highest authority, becoming queens and rulers who influenced the empire's history. Their importance was reflected in both political and religious life. Among the most prominent figures is Queen Hatshepsut, who ruled as pharaoh and promoted great architectural and commercial projects. Her reign is an example of exceptional female leadership, defying social norms and leaving a lasting legacy. Hatshepsut was represented with traditional male symbols to assert her power. In addition to queens, many women were priestesses who played a crucial role in temples and religious ceremonies. They served as intermediaries between the gods and society, performing rituals that maintained spiritual order. Their wisdom and knowledge were valued, and they could exert influence in the community. The figure of Isis, mother goddess and protector, was central to Egyptian mythology. She represented the feminine ideal of wisdom, magic, and maternal love. Her cult was widespread, and her story directly influenced daily life, especially in family and fertility. Isis symbolized the strength and resilience of women. In common life, women could own property, conduct business, and manage inheritances. They had legal rights to marry, divorce, and sue, which granted them an autonomy that few ancient societies recognized. This relative freedom reflects a social balance that favored family stability. Female education was not as common as male education, but some women learned to read and write, especially those linked to nobility or religion. Writing and knowledge were tools that allowed them to participate in administration and cultural activities. This access contributed to their social influence. Women were also artisans, weavers, and participated in economic activities that supported their families. Manual and creative work was part of their daily lives, and their labor was essential for economic development. Their productive role was respected within Egyptian society. In art and sculpture, women were represented in great detail, showing their beauty, elegance, and social status. Jewelry, clothes, and hairstyles reflected not only fashion, but also symbols of power and spirituality. These representations preserve their image for posterity and highlight their cultural importance. Mothers were valued as pillars of the home and educators of future generations. Motherhood was a sacred role that guaranteed the continuity of lineage and the transmission of values. The family was the basis of Egyptian society, and respect for women was linked to their role in the family unit. In legends, women often appear as wise counselors, sorceresses, or guardians of divine secrets. Their role in mythology reinforces the idea that they possessed special knowledge and spiritual powers. These narratives enrich the vision of women as integral beings in the Egyptian cosmovision. The relationship between men and women in Egypt was in many aspects one of collaboration and mutual respect. Although there were specific differences in roles, both sexes contributed to the kingdom's stability and prosperity. This dynamic was key to the empire's cultural and social longevity. In conclusion, the women of the Nile were queens, goddesses, sages, and fundamental pillars of a civilization that valued their contribution. Their legacy remains alive in stories, monuments, and artifacts that tell us of a complex and advanced society. Recognizing their importance means better understanding the soul of ancient Egypt. Chapter 6: Wars, Alliances, and Enemies of the Desert. Ancient Egypt was not only a civilization of peace and prosperity, but also an empire that faced multiple military challenges throughout its history. Wars were a recurring aspect, motivated by the defense of its territories, expansion, and control of strategic trade routes. These conflicts shaped the kingdom's political and military evolution. The main enemies came from desert and mountainous regions, such as the Nubian peoples to the south and the Asians to the northeast, who sought to take advantage of the Nile Valley's wealth. The empire's borders were areas of constant tension, where fortresses and garrisons were established to protect cities and vital resources. To defend itself and expand, the Egyptians developed an organized and efficient army, composed of infantry, war chariots, and archers. The pharaoh was the supreme commander, and war was understood as a sacred duty to maintain order and ma'at, universal harmony. Success in battle reinforced the ruler's authority. Political alliances also played a fundamental role in the empire's stability. Marriages between Egyptian and foreign royal families, as well as diplomatic agreements, helped consolidate peaceful relations with neighboring peoples. These alliances facilitated trade and cultural cooperation, avoiding major conflicts. A notable example was the relationship with the Hittites, which culminated in one of the first known peace treaties after the Battle of Kadesh. This agreement was a milestone in world diplomatic history, demonstrating Egyptian capacity to combine military force with negotiation. Peace ensured prosperity and development. The Egyptians also built fortifications and walls to protect their borders, such as the so-called Nubian Wall that defended the empire's south. These strategic structures allowed them to control enemy movements and safeguard vital trade routes for the kingdom's economy. Military architecture complemented military power. War was not only a physical matter, but also a spiritual one. Priests performed rituals to bless soldiers and ensure divine protection in battles. Images of warrior gods like Set were invoked to grant strength and courage. The combination of faith and strategy was crucial for success. Military campaigns allowed the empire to expand into territories rich in minerals and resources, increasing Egypt's wealth and prestige. The conquest of new lands secured tributes and control over trade routes, strengthening the economy and political power. These achievements were celebrated in inscriptions and monuments. However, Wars also caused devastation and suffering, affecting farmers and entire cities. The mobilization of human and material resources implied sacrifices for the civilian population, who often faced losses and displacements. Egyptian history acknowledges both the glory and the cost of war. Facing enemies and forging alliances were essential parts of ancient Egypt's survival and development. The ability to adapt to these circumstances maintained the empire's stability for centuries, allowing its culture and economy to flourish amidst constant challenges. Its warlike history is a reflection of its resilience. In summary, wars and alliances defined Egypt's political and social character, showing a civilization that managed to combine military force with diplomacy. These confrontations and agreements were key to preserving an empire that, despite its enemies, managed to endure and leave an impressive legacy. Chapter 7: Science, Medicine, and Ancestral Wisdom. Ancient Egypt was a cradle of advanced knowledge in science and medicine developed over thousands of years. The Egyptians combined observation, experimentation, and spiritual beliefs to create techniques that would astonish later civilizations. This knowledge contributed to the empire's health, agriculture, and engineering. Egyptian doctors held a respected role in society and used extensive knowledge of herbs, natural remedies, and surgical procedures. Their treatments were documented in papyri like the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest and most complete medical texts. This work compiled diagnoses, diseases, and curative recipes. Anatomy was understood through the practice of mummification, which allowed for studying the human body and its organs. Although with limitations, this knowledge led to advances in surgery, such as wound suturing and fracture reduction. Egyptian medicine combined the art of healing with rituals to expel evil spirits. In addition to medicine, Egyptian engineering shone in the construction of monuments and hydraulic works. The canals and dikes that controlled the Nile's waters were examples of their ability to plan and execute complex projects, ensuring the fertility of the lands and the well-being of the population. This technical wisdom was crucial for prosperity. The Egyptians also developed a system of mathematics based on units and fractions that allowed them to calculate areas, volumes, and distances. These calculations were essential for building temples and pyramids, demonstrating surprising precision. Geometry and arithmetic were applied in administration and commerce. Astronomy played a fundamental role in Egyptian life, guiding agriculture and religious rituals. They observed stars, planets, and constellations to create calendars that indicated the Nile's floods and sacred festivities. This connection between science and spirituality reinforced their worldview and social planning. Scribes were guardians of knowledge, copying and preserving scientific and religious texts on papyri. Their work ensured that ancestral wisdom was transmitted from generation to generation, consolidating a solid intellectual tradition. Schools of writing and mathematics trained the kingdom's future experts. Magic and science were intertwined, as Egyptians believed that technical knowledge had to be accompanied by spiritual protection. Amulets, spells, and rituals accompanied medical treatments and constructions, seeking to balance visible and invisible forces. This integration was an essential part of their culture. Botany and zoology were studied to utilize natural resources in food, medicine, and object creation. The Egyptians classified plants and animals, identifying useful properties for their survival and well-being. This empirical knowledge was reflected in their agricultural and healing practices. Hydraulics was another prominent field, with ingenious systems that channeled water for irrigation and consumption. These works allowed for the development of intensive agriculture that sustained a numerous and stable population. Water management was vital for the empire's ecological and economic balance. Advancements in military technology also reflected their scientific knowledge, with the manufacture of sophisticated weapons and war chariots. These developments facilitated the kingdom's defense and expansion, demonstrating the practical application of knowledge in various fields. Innovation was constant and strategic. Synthesis, the science, medicine, and ancestral wisdom of ancient Egypt were pillars that sustained its grandeur and legacy. The combination of practical experience, detailed observation, and spirituality created a rich and advanced culture that influenced the ancient world and continues to fascinate us today. Chapter 8. The Decline of an Immortal Empire. Ancient Egypt, which shone with splendor for millennia, began to face a slow and complex decline that transformed its history forever. Various internal and external factors contributed to this fall, including political and economic problems and pressure from foreign invaders who tested the empire's resilience. The fragmentation of power among pharaohs and local governors weakened the kingdom's unity. Periods of instability, called intermediate periods, showed how central authority lost control, generating internal conflicts and struggles for the throne. This political division facilitated the penetration of external forces into Egyptian territory. In parallel, economic crises affected agricultural production and trade, fundamental pillars of Egyptian well-being. Climate changes and variations in the Nile's floods negatively influenced, causing food shortages and difficulties in sustaining infrastructure and state expenses. Social pressure consequently increased. Invasions began with the Asian peoples called the Hyksos, who took advantage of the kingdom's weakness to occupy the Nile Delta. These invaders introduced new military technologies such as the use of the war chariot, which the Egyptians later adopted and improved to regain their territory. This episode marked a turning point in Egyptian military history. Subsequently, the empire was subjected to conquest by powerful empires such as the Persian and the Macedonian under Alexander the Great. These foreign dominations introduced new cultures and changed political and social dynamics. Despite this, the Egyptians preserved many of their ancestral traditions and beliefs. During the Greco-Roman era, Egypt continued to be an important cultural and economic center, but it no longer had the independence or power it once held. The blending of religions and customs created a multicultural society that, although enriching, diluted part of the original Egyptian identity. The worship of gods and religious practices continued to be central, but with new influences. Temples and monuments continued to be built and venerated, though with fewer resources and under the supervision of foreign rulers. Spirituality was a bond that kept the connection with the past alive. Large architectural works became less frequent, and construction techniques evolved into different styles, reflecting cultural blending. The ancient majesty of pyramids and temples was replaced by new forms like Hellenistic and Roman constructions, witnesses to historical transition. The Egyptian language, which endured for millennia, began to be replaced by Greek and Latin, affecting the transmission of knowledge and literature. However, hieroglyphic writing remained in use in religious contexts until it was forgotten during late antiquity, until its rediscovery in modern times. The artistic legacy continued to inspire with the production of sculptures, paintings, and jewelry that showed the synthesis of cultures and eras. This visual richness is a testament to a process of transformation that, although it involved losses, also gave rise to new aesthetic expressions. Finally, the decline of the immortal empire did not mean the disappearance of Egypt, but a profound transformation that allowed its culture to survive and adapt. Its history continues to be a source of inspiration and study, revealing the human capacity to reinvent itself in the face of time's challenges. Thus, Egypt leaves us a lesson in resilience and legacy, a testament that transcends centuries and connects us with the roots of civilization. Remembering this decline is to honor the memory of a people who built an eternal empire in the heart of the desert. Chapter 9. Curiosities and Legacies of Ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt left us a cultural and scientific legacy that continues to fascinate the modern world. From its monumental pyramids to its complex religious beliefs, this civilization developed a way of life that influenced many later cultures. Its legacy is a window into human history and ancestral creativity. A notable curiosity is the invention of papyrus, the first paper-like material that allowed for recording and preserving knowledge. This material was fundamental for Egyptian administration, literature, and science. Thanks to it, today we know many of their customs, laws, and discoveries. Hieroglyphs, a sacred writing system, combined phonetic symbols and logograms being one of the oldest and most complex forms of written communication. Its decipherment, thanks to the Rosetta Stone, opened the doors to understanding Egyptian history and its religious texts. This visual code is a masterpiece of art and linguistics. The Egyptian calendar, based on the Nile's floods, was a precursor to modern calendars. Divided into 12 months of 30 days plus 5 additional days, this system allowed for organizing agricultural and religious activities with precision. Its influence extended beyond Egypt, contributing to time measurement. Egyptians believed in life after death and developed elaborate rituals to ensure it. Mummification and tombs decorated, with hieroglyphs and paintings reflect this deep faith. These processes had not only a religious purpose, but also an artistic and cultural one, preserving the deceased's identity. The pyramids, symbols of power and spirituality, were built with astonishing engineering for their time. Their alignment with stars and cardinal points shows advanced knowledge of astronomy and mathematics. These structures remain a mystery and a testament to human genius. Egyptian art was governed by rigid rules that combined symbolism and function. Figures were represented in profiles and with specific proportions, reflecting an orderly and hierarchical worldview. This style influenced other cultures and is still recognized for its beauty and meaning. Temples and monuments were religious and social centers dedicated to gods who represented natural and spiritual forces. These places were gathering points, learning centers, and places of worship, where architecture and decoration played a vital role in the atayat, religious experience. They preserve accounts of Egyptian history and beliefs. Archaeological discoveries like Tutankhamun's tomb have revealed treasures and secrets that enrich our knowledge. These findings show the empire's material and spiritual wealth and allow for a better understanding of its life and death. Archaeology is the key to connecting with that distant past. Egyptian influence reached other cultures like Greek and Roman, who adopted artistic and religious elements. This allowed aspects of Egyptian civilization to endure and transform into new traditions, keeping alive the essence of their wisdom and creativity. Egyptian science and medicine laid the foundations for later advancements with techniques that still surprise with their effectiveness. Their focus on observation, diagnosis, and treatment reflected a deep understanding of the body and nature. This heritage is evident in modern medicine and science. Finally, ancient Egypt is an example of how a culture can build an immortal legacy through art, science, religion, and social organization. Its history invites us to reflect on humanity's power to create, adapt, and endure. Continuing to explore its world is a fascinating and enriching journey. If you enjoyed this journey through time and history, don't forget to follow our channel and become a member for early access to videos. Join us for more tales that connect you with the roots of myth and civilization. Thank you for being part of this adventure in Forgotten Scrolls. Chapter 10. Magic, Myths, and Sacred Rites. Magic was an inseparable part of the Egyptian world, present in every aspect of life. It was not about illusion, but a real force called Heka, which the gods granted to the world to balance chaos. Magicians, priests, and pharaohs used this energy for healing, protective, and religious purposes. Magical rituals were common in both temples and homes. There were spells to ward off diseases, protect children, attract love, or ensure an abundant harvest. These incantations were recited with solemnity and accompanied by gestures, amulets, and sacred objects. Egyptian amulets were symbols of divine protection carved in stone, metal, or ceramics. Each represented a deity or sacred concept, such as the Eye of Horus, the Scarab, or the Ankh. They were used in daily life and in funerary rites as guardians of the body and soul. Egyptian temples were not only religious centers, but also spaces of magical power. Only priests could access the deepest enclosures, where they performed complex rituals to maintain the balance between men and gods. The temple was the country's spiritual heart. Egyptian myths explained the origin of the world, the cycle of life, and the struggle between order and chaos. Stories like that of Osiris, murdered by his brother Set and resurrected by Isis, reflected the hope of eternal life and divine justice. These narratives guided the people's spirituality. The Book of the Dead was a collection of magical formulas and prayers that helped the deceased on their journey to the afterlife. Through this text, the soul faced trials, answered questions before the underworld judges, and sought a place in paradise known as the Fields of Yaru. Priests, in addition to being in charge of temples, acted as doctors, astronomers, and guardians of knowledge. Their preparation was rigorous, and their connection with the divine fundamental. Every action they performed had to follow strict rules of purity and ritual, precision. Music and dance were also part of sacred rites. They were believed to harmonize the body with the universe and please the gods. In ceremonies, sistra, drums, and flutes were used to accompany prayers and symbolic movements that evoked creation and rebirth. Dreams were interpreted as messages from the gods or visions of the future. There were dream books that offered specific meanings based on the elements present. Dreaming of clear water, for example, could announce good news or divine blessings. Statues of the gods were not simple representations, but living abodes of the deities. They were dressed in tunics, symbolically fed, and worshipped with incense and offerings. The divine presence was real and active, and its favor was sought through constant service. Astrology played an important role, as it was believed that destiny was written in the stars. Astrologer priests studied celestial movements to foresee events and guide important decisions. This knowledge connected the human with the cosmic. In summary, Egyptian magic, myths, and rites were much more than superstition. They were a complex system of beliefs that sustained the soul of civilization, a profound way of understanding the world, death, and the divine that still fills us with wonder and admiration today. Chapter 11. The Eternal Art of Ancient Egypt. Egyptian art did not seek beauty for its own sake, but the representation of order, eternity, and the sacred. Every stroke, color, and proportion had a symbolic purpose, aligned with the people's spiritual worldview. Nothing was improvised in their art. Mural paintings decorated tombs and temples, narrating scenes of daily life, religious ceremonies, and journeys to the afterlife. Intense and durable mineral colors like lapis lazuli blue, ochre red, and malachite green were used. Each color had a spiritual value. Egyptian sculpture depicted gods, pharaohs, and nobles with rigid, symmetrical, and solemn poses. The aim was to convey power, eternity, and divinity. Many of these sculptures were placed in temples or tombs as receptacles for the soul or as protectors of the afterlife. Statues of the gods were carefully carved, painted, and dressed in tunics. Their size varied from tiny figures to monumental colossi. These works were more than decorative. They were sacred and participated in the daily rituals of the temples. Relief was another widely used technique, especially on stone walls. There were bas reliefs and sunk reliefs, where figures were directly carved into the stone. These scenes typically narrated battles, religious processions, or royal festivals. Egyptian architecture reflected their belief in eternity. Pyramids, obelisks, and temples were designed to withstand the test of time. Proportions, astronomical orientation, and decoration symbolized cosmic balance and connection with the gods. Everyday objects were also artistic. Carved chests, bronze mirrors, ivory combs, decorated ceramic, vessels. Every object, no matter how simple, could be adorned with religious or geometric motifs that showed the aesthetic taste and spirituality of the people. Egyptian jewelry combined art, technique, and symbolism. It was crafted with gold, semi-precious stones, and glass, and had protective as well as aesthetic functions. Necklaces, bracelets, and rings were worn by nobles and priests in ceremonies and in daily life. Funerary art included masks, painted sarcophagi, and ushabtis, small, figures that served the deceased in the afterlife. The entire tomb environment was meticulously decorated, as it was believed that this beauty would accompany the soul through eternity. Egyptian artists were anonymous workers who followed precise orders dictated by priests and architects. They worked in workshops near temples and palaces, adhering to strict canons that ensured harmony and correctness according to tradition. Despite its rigidity, Egyptian art achieved a unique expressiveness and strength that still captivate us today. The repetition of forms, clear narrative, and majesty of their works have made Egyptian art a symbol of eternity and profound spirituality. Ancient Egypt taught us that art can be more than beauty. It can be faith, memory, and a bridge between the visible and invisible worlds. Their works live on in museums, temples, and hearts, reminding us that true art never dies.